The day I learned my life had a price tag was the day I stopped believing I could hide. My name is Ethan Walker, and for 23 years, I survived by staying invisible. In a world where every alpha, beta, and omega fit neatly into categories people understood, I was something else entirely. A rare male omega. The kind most people thought existed only in old medical journals and whispered rumors. My entire childhood had been built around one rule: never let anyone find out what you are. So I moved from city to city, kept temporary jobs, avoided attention, and lived in small apartments where nobody asked questions. For a while, it worked. Then everything changed on a rainy Thursday night in Chicago. I was finishing a late shift at a bookstore when I received a text message from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was spam. But the message contained my full name, my address, and one sentence that made my blood run cold. They know what you are. Run. By the time I got home, someone had already broken into my apartment. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged. Yet every drawer had been opened, every cabinet searched, every private corner examined. It felt less like a robbery and more like a warning. I packed a backpack and left within 15 minutes. For 3 days, I stayed in cheap roadside motels, paying cash whenever possible. I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe somebody had confused me with someone else. Then I saw the advertisement. It appeared on a private underground forum I occasionally monitored for information about rare omega trafficking networks. Usually, I only checked it to stay informed about potential dangers. This time, my own photograph stared back at me from the screen. The title above it made my stomach twist. Rare male omega. Verified. Private auction begins Saturday. I couldn't breathe. Hundreds of comments had already appeared beneath the listing. Some treated me like an investment. Others discussed me as if I were a collectible item. None of them talked about me as a human being. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped my laptop. Somebody had discovered my identity and turned it into a business. Opportunity. The auction location remained hidden, but a countdown timer ticked relentlessly toward the weekend. I considered going to the authorities. Then I remembered how much money and influence existed behind organizations like this. If people were willing to spend fortunes on obtaining a rare omega, they were powerful enough to bury evidence and silence complaints. Saturday arrived faster than I wanted. I spent the entire day preparing to disappear again. New city, new name, new life. But before I could leave, another message arrived. This one contained an address. Beneath it were 6 words. They already know where you are. Panic overwhelmed reason. Against every instinct, I drove to the location. It was an abandoned luxury hotel outside the city limits. Expensive black vehicles filled the parking lot. Men and women in tailored suits entered through private security checkpoints. The moment I saw them, I understood the horrible truth. The auction was real, and I was the product. Hidden behind a service corridor, I listened as wealthy bidders discussed numbers so large they barely sounded real. Then the room suddenly fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned toward the entrance. Someone important had arrived. I followed their gaze and saw a tall man step through the doors. Calm, impossibly composed, dangerous without saying a word. Dominic Moretti, the most feared alpha in the mafia world. The man everyone else moved aside for. And as his cold gray eyes swept across the room, they stopped directly on me. For a moment, nobody moved. The enormous ballroom seemed frozen in place as Dominic Moretti's gaze remained fixed on me. I had never met him before, yet something about the way he looked at me made it feel as though he already knew exactly who I was. Around him, conversations died instantly. Wealthy investors, powerful executives, and influential figures who moments earlier had been discussing bids worth millions of dollars suddenly became silent spectators. Dominic did not raise his voice. He did not issue commands. He simply stood there, and the entire room adjusted itself around his presence. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to leave. I took one cautious step backward into the shadows of the service corridor. Then another. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure someone could hear it. When I finally turned to leave, a calm voice stopped me. You should not run. I froze. The voice belonged to an older man standing a few feet away. He wore a dark suit and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to important people. Excuse me, I asked. The man glanced toward Dominic before returning his attention to me. If he wanted you stopped, you would already be stopped. The fact that you are still standing there means he is allowing it. That explanation somehow made me feel worse. Without waiting for another word, I hurried through the corridor and exited through a side door. Cool night air hit my face. The parking lot stretched before me, illuminated by rows of expensive vehicles and soft white lights. My car sat near the far end. I moved toward it as quickly as possible without drawing attention. 20 yards away. 15. 10. I reached into my pocket for my keys. A black luxury sedan rolled silently into my path and stopped. The rear passenger window lowered. I expected security. Instead, I found myself staring directly at Dominic Moretti. Up close, he looked even more intimidating than his reputation suggested. Not because he appeared angry. Quite the opposite. His expression was completely controlled. Calm. Thoughtful. As if he were evaluating a puzzle nobody else could solve. Ethan Walker, he said. Hearing my name from his mouth sent a chill through me. I do not know you, I replied carefully. No, he said. But someone knows you well enough to sell your identity. I tightened my grip on my keys. I can handle my own problems. A faint expression crossed his face. Not amusement exactly. More like curiosity. Can you? He asked. I hated that question because I did not have a good answer. The auction proved I had already lost control of the situation. Dominic glanced toward the hotel entrance where guests were beginning to leave. The people inside are not interested in helping you. They are interested in owning information about you. And what about you? I asked. Why are you here? He was silent for several seconds. Because someone used my name to attract bidders. That answer surprised me. Dominic Moretti was not participating in the auction. Someone had advertised his attendance to increase its value. Suddenly, the situation felt even larger than I realized. If powerful people were willing to misuse his reputation, then the network behind this operation was far more connected than I imagined. Dominic opened the car door and stepped out. The parking lot immediately seemed smaller. You have two choices, he said. You can leave tonight and spend the next several months looking over your shoulder. Or you can come with me until I determine who organized this. Why would you help me? I asked. His gray eyes studied me carefully. Because whoever exposed you made a mistake. What mistake? I whispered. Dominic looked toward the hotel one last time. They assumed I would ignore it. Before I could respond, headlights appeared at the far end of the parking lot. 3 unfamiliar vehicles turned toward us. Dominic's expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not concern. Recognition. And for the first time that night, I realized this situation was only beginning. The 3 vehicles continued rolling across the parking lot with deliberate precision, their headlights cutting through the darkness like silent warnings. Every instinct told me to leave while I still could, but my feet refused to move. Dominic remained perfectly still beside the sedan, watching the approaching vehicles with an expression so calm it was unsettling. Whoever was inside those cars clearly expected him to react. Instead, he looked almost bored. The first vehicle stopped about 30 feet away. A man stepped out wearing an expensive charcoal coat despite the mild weather. He looked polished, confident, and completely out of place near an abandoned hotel. 2 more people emerged from the other vehicles, both carrying tablets and folders instead of anything threatening. It felt less like a confrontation and more like a business meeting. Mr. Moretti, the man called politely. We were hoping to speak with you. Dominic did not answer immediately. His attention remained fixed on the newcomers as though he were trying to decide whether they were worth his time. Finally, he said, You found me. The man smiled. You are not difficult to find. Something about the exchange made me uneasy. These people clearly knew who Dominic was, yet they did not seem intimidated by him. That alone told me they possessed influence of their own. The man glanced toward me. His smile widened slightly. And there he is. My stomach dropped. He was looking at me the same way the auction bidders had looked at me. Not as a person, as an opportunity. Dominic stepped slightly forward. It was a small movement, but it blocked their direct line of sight. You have 10 seconds, Dominic said. The smile disappeared from the man's face. We came to resolve a misunderstanding. You created the misunderstanding, Dominic replied. Silence followed. The man adjusted his coat and sighed. Then perhaps we should discuss compensation. I had no idea what any of this meant. Compensation for what? The auction? My identity. None of it made sense. Then the man said something that changed everything. The buyers are disappointed. Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly. That sounds like their problem. Some of them paid deposits. then refund them. The man laughed softly. You know it is not that simple. Dominic's voice became colder. Actually, it is. The conversation continued for several more minutes, but one fact became painfully clear. These people had expected Dominic to participate in the auction. They had built their entire business plan around his reputation. His attendance alone would have driven prices higher. Instead, he had shown up and ruined whatever arrangement they had carefully constructed. Eventually, the visitors left. Their vehicles disappeared into the darkness as quietly as they had arrived. The moment they were gone, I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. Who were they? I asked. Dominic opened the sedan door. People who thought they could profit from something they did not understand. And what exactly do they not understand? For the first time all evening, Dominic hesitated. His expression became thoughtful, almost concerned. You. The answer caught me completely off guard. I stared at him. You do not even know me. That is true, he said, which is why this situation bothers me. I frowned. That makes no sense. Dominic looked toward the dark horizon beyond the parking lot. Someone spent years hiding your existence. Someone with resources. Someone intelligent. His gaze returned to me. The question is why they suddenly stopped. A chill traveled down my spine. I had spent years believing I was simply lucky. Lucky nobody found me. Lucky nobody asked questions. Now I was being forced to consider something far more disturbing. What if I had not been hiding alone? What if someone had been protecting me this entire time? The drive into the city was quiet, but my mind refused to slow down. I sat in the back of Dominic Moretti's sedan watching Chicago's skyline glow against the night sky, while his words repeated endlessly inside my head. Someone had been protecting me. The idea sounded impossible. I had spent years believing I was alone. Every apartment lease, every temporary job, every careful move had felt like my responsibility. Yet now I could not stop wondering whether invisible hands had been clearing obstacles before I ever noticed them. Nearly 40 minutes later, the car entered a private underground garage beneath a building that looked more like a luxury hotel than a residence. Glass, steel, and polished stone reflected soft lights as we stepped inside. Nobody questioned Dominic. Nobody even looked surprised to see him arrive after midnight. A woman in a Navy business suit approached immediately. She appeared to be in her early 40s, composed and professional. Everything is prepared, she said. Dominic nodded. Good. The woman handed him a folder before briefly glancing at me. There was no judgment in her expression, no curiosity, just careful observation. Mr. Walker, she said politely. Welcome. The fact that she already knew my name made me uneasy. Dominic noticed. This is Claire. She manages security and logistics. Claire offered a small smile. You are safe here. I wanted to believe her. Unfortunately, after discovering my photograph had been sold to strangers, trust felt expensive. Claire guided me to a private suite on one of the upper floors. The apartment was larger than every place I had lived in combined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The kitchen looked untouched. A dining table sat beside a wall lined with books. It felt strangely normal. Not like the home of someone feared throughout entire criminal networks. Get some rest, Claire said. We will talk in the morning. After she left, I walked through the apartment checking every room. Old habits. Survival habits. Only when I reached the study did I find something unexpected. Several framed photographs stood on a shelf. Children laughing at a charity event. Families receiving scholarships. Community centers with Dominic standing awkwardly in the background as though he would rather be anywhere else. I stared at the images. None of them matched the stories I had heard about him. Around 2 in the morning, exhaustion finally won. I fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, sunlight woke me. For a brief moment, I forgot where I was. Then reality returned. The auction. The warning messages. Dominic. Everything. I entered the kitchen and nearly jumped when I found him already there. He stood beside the counter holding a cup of coffee while reading several reports. You look surprised, he said without looking up. Most people do not expect company in their kitchen. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Technically, it is my kitchen. Before I could respond, Claire entered carrying another folder. Unlike the previous night, her calm expression was gone. She placed the folder in front of Dominic. We found the source, she said quietly. Dominic opened it and scanned the contents. For the first time since I had met him, genuine concern appeared in his eyes. That is not possible, he said. My stomach tightened. What happened? Dominic slowly closed the folder. Then he looked directly at me. The person who exposed your identity should have been dead for 15 years. The room fell silent after Dominic spoke. I looked from him to Claire, waiting for someone to explain what that statement actually meant. Nobody did. Dominic reopened the folder and carefully slid a photograph across the counter toward me. The image showed a man standing outside an old brick building. He appeared to be in his late 30s, with dark hair and sharp features that somehow felt familiar. I stared at the photograph for several seconds before realizing why. The resemblance was not exact, but there were similarities. The shape of the eyes, the jawline. Something about him reminded me of my own reflection. Who is he? I asked quietly. Dominic folded his arms. His name was Nathan Cross. Was. The word immediately caught my attention. You said he should be dead. Claire nodded. According to every record we have, he died 15 years ago. I looked back at the photograph. And what does he have to do with me? Dominic exchanged a glance with Claire. It was brief, but it told me they had already discussed this privately. That is what we are trying to determine, Claire said. I did not like that answer. Too many people seemed to know pieces of my life, while I remained completely in the dark. Dominic closed the folder and walked toward the windows overlooking the city. Morning sunlight reflected across the glass towers outside. Everything looked normal. People were commuting to work. Traffic moved through the streets. Somewhere below, millions of lives continued without interruption. Meanwhile, mine seemed to be unraveling faster every hour. Nathan Cross specialized in identity protection, Dominic finally said. He helped people disappear. I frowned. Like witness protection? Not exactly. Dominic turned back toward me. People who needed to vanish permanently hired him. New names. New records. New lives. A strange feeling settled in my chest. And you think he protected me? Claire opened another file. We found evidence suggesting somebody used his network approximately 20 years ago. 20 years. My throat tightened. I was 23. Dominic continued. The timeline matches your childhood. Suddenly, memories I had not thought about in years returned. Moving constantly. Never staying in one place very long. My guardian refusing to discuss my parents. The warnings about remaining unnoticed. Back then, I assumed every child experienced life that way. Only later did I realize how unusual it had been. My guardian always said we traveled because of work, I murmured. Claire's expression softened slightly. What was his name? Benjamin Walker. She typed something into her tablet. Seconds later, her face changed. Not dramatically, just enough to make my stomach sink. What? I asked. Claire looked at Dominic before answering. Benjamin Walker does not exist. My heart skipped. Of course he exists. He raised me. The identity exists, she clarified. The man behind it does not. At least not officially. The room suddenly felt smaller. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. If Benjamin Walker was not his real name, then who had raised me? Why had he hidden his identity? And why had he spent years teaching me to stay invisible? Dominic's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, and his expression immediately hardened. What happened? Claire asked. Dominic read the message silently before looking directly at me. Someone just accessed a private archive containing your original birth records. A chill traveled through my entire body. I thought you said those records were hidden. They were. Dominic slipped the phone into his pocket, which means whoever found them knows something we do not. I stared at him. What is in those records? For the first time since I had met him, Dominic hesitated before answering. That is exactly what we are about to find out. The next 2 hours felt longer than the previous 2 days combined. Dominic transformed one of the conference rooms in the penthouse into a temporary investigation center. Large screens displayed records, timelines, and archive documents while Claire coordinated calls with people across the country. I sat at the far end of the table feeling like a spectator watching someone else's life unfold. Every file seemed connected to me, yet most of the information was completely unfamiliar. Shortly after noon, Claire finally entered carrying a slim black folder. The expression on her face told me she had found something important. She placed the folder on the table and carefully opened it. Inside was a scanned birth certificate. My birth certificate. For several seconds, nobody spoke. I stared at the document as though it might disappear if I blinked. The paper looked old, but the information was clear. Ethan Walker. Date of birth. Hospital location. Medical identifiers. Everything appeared normal until Claire pointed to a section near the bottom. This field was altered, she said quietly. Dominic leaned forward. Can it be restored? Claire nodded. Partially. She tapped a few keys, and another image appeared on the screen. Layers of digital reconstruction slowly revealed text that had been hidden beneath official modifications. My chest tightened as new information emerged. Under parental records, only one name remained visible. Eleanor Cross. I stared at it. Cross. Dominic immediately looked toward me. The same surname as Nathan Cross. The connection hit me instantly. Nathan Cross, the man who supposedly died 15 years ago. The man connected to my hidden identity. The man who specialized in helping people disappear. Suddenly his interest in my life no longer seemed random. Was he related to her? I asked. Claire nodded slowly. According to archived census records, Nathan Cross had a younger sister named Eleanor. My mind raced. Then she was my mother. The words felt strange leaving my mouth. I had spent most of my life without answers about my family. Now one answer had appeared, only to create a dozen new mysteries. Dominic remained focused on the screen. What happened to her? Claire's silence lasted too long. Finally she answered. She disappeared 22 years ago. My stomach dropped. Disappeared? Claire looked genuinely sympathetic. There are no records after your birth. The room became quiet again. Outside the windows, helicopters crossed the skyline and traffic moved through the city below. Normal life continued while my entire understanding of the past shifted beneath my feet. Dominic studied the reconstructed file carefully. Then something caught his attention. What is this? Claire followed his gaze. A second hidden notation sat near the bottom of the document. Most of it remained corrupted, but one sentence had survived. Claire enlarged the text until it filled the screen. My pulse accelerated as the words became readable. Special classification approved. Genetic status restricted. Access level Omega Prime. Nobody spoke. Even Claire looked confused. I have never seen that designation before, she admitted. Dominic's expression darkened. I have. Both of us looked at him. For the first time since I met him, genuine alarm appeared in his eyes. That classification was discontinued decades ago. What does it mean? I asked. Dominic remained silent for several seconds. When he finally answered, his voice was lower than usual. It means your existence was never supposed to become public knowledge. Before I could ask another question, every screen in the room suddenly went black. A single message appeared across each display. We found him first. For several seconds, nobody moved. The message remained frozen across every screen in the room, glowing white against a black background. We found him first. My pulse hammered in my ears. The words felt personal, as though whoever sent them was standing inside the room watching us. Claire immediately moved to one of the terminals and began typing commands. Nothing changed. Every monitor remained locked. They are inside the system, she said quietly. How? Dominic asked. His voice stayed calm, but I could tell his patience was wearing thin. Claire shook her head. This level of access should not be possible. The screens suddenly flickered again. The message disappeared. A new image replaced it. My breath caught. It was an old photograph. A woman stood beside a lake, smiling toward the camera. Her light hair moved in the wind. She looked young, happy, familiar. I could not explain why, but the moment I saw her, something deep inside me reacted. That is her, Claire whispered. Eleanor Cross. My mother. I stepped closer to the screen without realizing it. 23 years. 23 years without a face, a voice, or even a confirmed name. Yet now she was standing in front of me. Not in person, not alive, just a photograph. But somehow it felt like meeting her for the first time. The image changed. Again, another photograph appeared. This one showed Eleanor standing beside a man. He was taller, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat. His face was partially obscured by sunlight. Can you enhance it? Dominic asked. Claire worked quickly. The resolution sharpened. The man's features became clearer. The room fell silent. Even I recognized him immediately. Nathan Cross. The same man from the earlier file. The man who supposedly died 15 years ago. Why would he send this? I asked. Dominic folded his arms. Assuming it is him. Before anyone could answer, text appeared beneath the photograph. If you want the truth, come alone. A location followed. Coordinates. An address outside the city. Then the entire system went dark. This time the screens remained blank. Claire looked frustrated. They are gone. Dominic turned toward the windows. His expression had become unreadable. I had spent enough time around him now to recognize that look. He was thinking several steps ahead. "You are not seriously considering this," Claire said. Dominic did not answer, which was answer enough. "It could be a trap," she continued. "It probably is," Dominic replied. I stared at both of them. What if it is real? They looked at me. What if that is actually Nathan Cross? I asked. What if he knows what happened to my mother? What if he knows why my identity was hidden? Neither of them responded immediately, because they knew I was right. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone had offered actual answers. Dangerous answers. Uncertain answers. But answers nonetheless. Dominic walked back toward the conference table and picked up the folder containing my birth records. "We leave in 1 hour." Claire sighed heavily. "I knew you were going to say that." "Prepare transportation," Dominic said. Then his attention shifted to me. "You stay close to me at all times." I should have argued. I should have demanded independence. Instead, I found myself nodding. Because despite everything, Dominic was the only person who seemed determined to uncover the truth instead of profit from it. As Claire left the room, my phone suddenly vibrated inside my pocket. I frowned. Almost. Nobody had this number. When I looked at the screen, a single text message waited. Unknown sender. For words. "Do not trust Dominic Moretti." The message remained on my screen long after I stopped reading it. For simple words. "Do not trust Dominic Moretti." My first instinct was to show him immediately. My second instinct was to hide it. That realization bothered me more than the message itself. Only a few days earlier, I had never heard Dominic's name outside rumors and news stories. Now I was trusting him with my safety, my history, and possibly the truth about my family. Yet I still knew almost nothing about him. I slipped the phone back into my pocket before anyone noticed. An hour later, we left the city. The vehicle moved north along a quiet highway lined with dense forests and small towns. Gray clouds drifted across the afternoon sky, casting long shadows over the landscape. Dominic sat across from me reviewing information on a tablet, while Claire coordinated logistics through a secure communication channel. Neither of them seemed nervous. I was nervous enough for all three of us. The coordinates eventually led to a remote lakeside property nearly 200 miles from Chicago. The place looked abandoned at first glance. A weathered cabin stood near the shoreline. Tall pine trees surrounded the area, shielding it from the nearest road. The lake itself stretched endlessly beneath the cloudy sky. My pulse quickened the moment I stepped out of the vehicle. Something about this place felt familiar. Not consciously, more like a memory hiding beneath the surface. Dominic seemed to notice my reaction. "You have been here before?" he asked. "I do not think so," I answered. "But it feels strange." Claire studied the surroundings carefully. "There are no recent property records connected to this location." Dominic nodded toward the cabin. "Stay close." We approached slowly. To my surprise, the front door was unlocked. The interior was clean, not abandoned at all. Someone had been living here recently. Books lined the shelves. A kettle sat on the stove. Fresh flowers rested on a small wooden table beside the window. It looked less like a hideout and more like a home. Then I saw the photographs. My breath caught instantly. Dozens of framed pictures covered an entire wall. Some showed landscapes. Others showed people. And several showed me. Not recent photographs. Childhood photographs. Images I had never seen before. There I was at 5 years old sitting beside a lake. Another showed me holding a fishing pole. Another captured me laughing while standing next to a woman whose face was partially turned away from the camera. My legs felt weak. "Where did these come from?" I whispered. Nobody answered because nobody knew. Dominic carefully examined the wall. Then he stopped, his gaze fixed on one particular photograph. I followed his eyes. The image showed a younger version of myself, standing between two adults. One was Eleanor Cross. There was no doubt about it. I recognized her immediately from the digital archive. The second person stood beside her with one arm around her shoulders. The man's face was finally visible. Dominic stared at the photograph. Claire looked shocked. I looked confused. "What?" I asked. Claire slowly turned toward Dominic. "You never told him?" Dominic remained silent. My stomach tightened. "Told me what?" For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Dominic looked directly at me. His expression carried something I had never seen before. Not authority. Not confidence. Regret. "Because the man standing next to your mother," he said quietly, "was my father." For several seconds, I could not process what I had just heard. The cabin seemed to shrink around me as I stared at the photograph. My mother stood smiling beside a man who was apparently Dominic's father. The implications crashed into me all at once. Every mystery that had consumed my life suddenly connected to a family I had never known existed. "No," I said quietly. "That cannot be right." Dominic looked back at the photograph. "I wish it was not." Claire carefully removed the frame from the wall and examined the back. A folded envelope slipped loose and landed on the table. All three of us froze. The paper looked old but intact. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Written across the front was a single name. Ethan. My breath caught. This letter had been waiting for me. Somehow, after all these years, someone had known I would eventually arrive here. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. The ink had faded slightly, but every word remained readable. "Ethan, if you are reading this, then our plan failed. I am sorry for that. Everything we did was meant to protect you. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. She knew that certain people would never allow you to live a normal life if they discovered the truth. So we hid you. We changed names. We erased records. We sacrificed everything to give you a chance at freedom." I stopped reading for a moment as emotion tightened my throat. Dominic remained silent. Claire quietly looked away, giving me privacy. I continued. "The designation attached to your birth was never supposed to exist. You were born with a genetic profile that powerful organizations spent decades trying to control. Your mother refused to let that happen. She chose you over everything else. If you ever reach this place, remember one thing. Your value was never in what made you rare. Your value was always in who you are." The letter ended with a signature. Nathan Cross. Silence filled the cabin. After everything, Nathan had been real. He had protected me. My mother had protected me. Even Benjamin Walker had been part of the effort to keep me safe. For the first time in my life, the emptiness surrounding my past finally had shape. The answers were painful, but they were answers. Dominic stepped closer. "There is one more thing." He pointed toward the final page. A small handwritten note had been added beneath the signature. I looked down and read it. "If Dominic Moretti is with you, trust him." The room became perfectly still. My mind immediately returned to the anonymous text message. "Do not trust Dominic Moretti." Someone had wanted us divided. Someone had wanted me suspicious. But the man who sacrificed years protecting my identity had written the exact opposite. Slowly, I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. Then I looked at Dominic. For the first time since we met, I truly saw him. Not the feared businessman. Not the powerful alpha everyone stepped aside for. Just a man carrying pieces of the same history I had been searching for. "Thank you," I said. Dominic seemed surprised by the words. A faint smile appeared. "You do not need to thank me." Outside, the clouds finally began to part. Sunlight reflected across the lake, turning the water into a sheet of gold. The questions that remained would take time to answer. There were still people searching for information about me. There were still secrets buried in the past. But for the first time, I was no longer running from shadows.